Welcome to another episode of Casting Starcraft 2 with Daybreak. Today bringing you a gold standard Protoss vs Protoss game on the wonderful map Daybreak LE, and without further ado jumping straight into the action here. On the lower left hand side of the map in red we have tGMixMaster versus his opponent in blue. On the upper right hand side UEDCommander. Overall, Protoss vs Protoss, still a very interesting matchup in Heart of the Swarm, with a number of different build options for both races to go. I've certainly been liking some of the openings that have been seen coming out, so maybe some fast Oracle play, or even the fast Dark Templar play that's now possible, what with DTs being cheaper in Heart of the Swarm. And it wouldn't surprise me to see some kind of 4 to 7 gate action here coming out from both of these players, maybe macroing behind that and perhaps transitioning into those late game units that Protoss are so well known and respected for. After all, we all love to see a little bit of Colossus action out on the field. Both players already throwing down their first pylons. UEDCommander actually going for an interesting location for his first pylon here by his natural ramp in, whereas tGMixMaster actually choosing to go for speed over base stylistic and SimCity-ness here by placing his directly by his command center. And we are already seeing gates coming out from both players, and UEDCommander already moving out over the map to scout. Both these players actually currently on fairly similar timings. UEDCommander actually slightly ahead of his opponent, it would seem, here in terms of build timings here, but all in all at this stage in the game it's not too much of a problem. But we do see an early gas actually coming out from tGMixMaster here. This could be reminiscent of some early perhaps Oracle or Stargate transition play, or perhaps even simply for the earlier Cybercore units, as it looks like UEDCommander has not actually yet gone for his first gas yet, which is going to limit his early build option choices somewhat, and having that gas is actually very important obviously for the warp gate research here. But we do actually now see that gas coming down here for UEDCommander. Both players now scouting their opponent's bases. tGMixMaster here having a look around, and UEDCommander having seen the cybernetics core coming down. But is he aware of that gas count? No, he hasn't actually seen his opponent's gas yet. So as far as UEDCommander is concerned, this could actually be a gasless build so far, and that is a dangerous position for him to be putting himself in, especially if he reacts to this in the wrong kind of way. Though he has got his cybercore on the way here, ready to transition into some of those bigger gateway units like Stalkers and Sentries before perhaps moving on to maybe Stargate technology. And tGMixMaster here actually putting a pylon over on the far side of his base. A good spot here actually to hide technology. And while UEDCommander is aware of the cybercore being there, as I say, not being aware yet of the gas inside that base and not knowing about that other pylon could prove to be slightly dangerous in late game, as the number of options now that tGMixMaster actually has is going to go up, especially with that not being scouted out. We are actually seeing tGMixMaster here taking the second gas, so perhaps looking for a slightly more gas-intensive build, though UEDCommander has already finished his, so it'll be interesting to see what both these players are led to go for. UEDCommander here actually adding on a second gateway, perhaps going for a 2-gate robo build, which was certainly quite popular in Wings of Liberty. Not seen so much of it in Heart of the Swarm yet. It's often seen a lot more Stargate play, but it could be quite cool to see what UEDCommander actually decides to come out with for this build. And in fact, there we go, the Robo Bay coming down now. It is looking like it's going to be a 2-gate robotics play. So we're probably looking to see here some either Blink Stalker perhaps, or even a Sentry, a Stalker Immortal play here. Though once he gets that warp gate research up, it will be certainly good to go. And we do see a robo facility here coming down for tGMixMaster, as well as adding on 2 more gateways here. So both still using fairly similar builds here, both going for a sort of 2-gate robo style, which could mean for some interesting middle map engagements. The Immortal play could be quite fun here, especially as they have the capability of shutting down those Stalkers quite easily. You need at least a decent number of Zealots to take on Immortals, otherwise your Stalkers literally just get peeled apart. So I'd like to see at least charge being got here for both of these players, if that's the kind of play they want to do. And we are actually now seeing an Observer coming out, so maybe it is going to be Blink Stalker here for UEDCommander. Blink Stalker I don't feel to be as effective on Daybreak, as the number of opportunities to blink into the bases are fairly limited, only having basically this short gap right here in which you can blink up into the main here. But we are actually seeing the expansion coming out for tGMixMaster now. He's suddenly getting an economic advantage over his opponent, and his observer is actually going to go out and try and get some additional scout information off, as well as getting actually that first immortal out. If he decides to chrono that could actually be an interesting choice here, as it means he'll end up getting that first immortal out a lot quicker than his opponent, and maybe could make an interesting push or a stronger push with an immortal play. Though the mothership core here is actually going to allow UEDCommander to get some fairly robust defense with the photon overcharge ability of that being able to be thrown down on the Nexus. It actually does quite a lot of damage, very useful for holding early pushes and all-ins. So far seen it used a lot against early Zerg attacks, and I've also seen it being used against those Blink Stalker plays that Protoss like to do against one another. So it's going to be interesting to see what's coming out here, but we do actually see UEDCommander actually chronoing out that first immortal of his own, and it looks actually like tGMixMaster is also going to be chronoing his own, but his immortal count is already actually standing at 2, and he does have a healthy mix of Stalkers, slightly more than his opponent, though UEDCommander here is actually mixing in a few Zealots, which can also act as a little bit of a meat shield for the Immortals against the other units, such as Stalkers, and especially if he gets that charge for the Zealots as well as the Blink. And if he can shut down that observer, this could be quite a nice little early victory for UEDCommander here, as it is essentially going to blind tGMixMaster now to what his opponent's doing. I mean, he knows he's got the army there, he knows roughly how big the army is, but he's not going to know whether or not it's going to be hitting soon. So perhaps we'll see some Stalkers and some additional Stalkers and maybe a few sentries coming out here for those force fields to act as a slightly defensive buffer here for both players. The immortal count though now going up for both, and we are actually seeing a forge coming down for tGMixMaster, perhaps looking to get those upgrades. UEDCommander actually got a halt on production at the moment, waiting while he throws down that Nexus of his own, slightly behind here, so his economy is actually going to be a little bit lower here than tGMixMaster's. But we are seeing some additional sentries coming in here, so that force field ability, and also obviously with the Guardian Shield providing a nice boost to those units' lifespans here. It'll be interesting to see whether or not that forge goes straight onto those ground upgrades. No, he is actually instead electing to throw down a cannon here, and UEDCommander is seeing this all with a well-placed observer. But he is now actually chronoing out those +1 upgrades. It's a good choice here, as in the war of attrition, those upgrades could count for quite a lot, especially in those early engagements. And we're also actually seeing a warp prism here coming out for UEDCommander. That's actually a fairly interesting choice. We could end up seeing some immortal drops here, especially with the warp-ins of Stalkers as well to back that up, or even Zealots. And the Twilight Council coming down now, so that's very suggestive now that he wants to get that Zealot charge or even that Stalker blink. But it'll definitely be interesting to see exactly what he wants to do with this warp prism. I'm actually quite a fan of Protoss drops. It's something that I feel isn't used very often in competitive gameplay as much as it is for, say, Terran. Terran, of course, being well known for those drops and getting incredibly more powerful with those drops now, obviously with the medevac afterburner ability. But this warp prism is actually loaded up with 4 Zealots here, and of course if his warp in timings are just finishing, he'll be easily be able to warp in, I think, another 4 based on his warp gate count at the moment. No, just another 3. But even so, dropping 7 Zealots into his opponent's mineral line could cause quite a bit of damage, especially as tGMixMaster's army is pretty much sat by his natural at the moment, so he's not really going to have much of a response to be able to defend this, except for perhaps warping in units into the line here. And in fact, he is warping in those Stalkers, and they are actually going to be placed in such a position to stop the Zealots from being able to do a lot of damage, and UEDCommander now going to want to try and obviously get this warp prism out. If he loses that could be quite dangerous. But it looks like he didn't actually scout the robotics bay going down here. Now that could have been a big victory here for UEDCommander if he'd seen that coming down. But this is very suggestive that tGMixMaster is perhaps wanting to go into Colossus play here with the Immortals and Stalkers. It's a little bit of a screen to defend those high value but such high damage units, especially if his opponent's got a lot of Zealots or even the sentries in the mix, as these are all obviously light units, and the Colossus can do an absolutely phenomenal amount of damage across the board here. UEDCommander actually electing to go for a little bit of a wall in at the front of this entrance here, which I feel is a little bit of an odd choice, especially given the fact that it's no short work to literally come around the side here and up this entrance into the natural, which would bypass this sort of wall in that he's got going on here quite easily. But that is an extra 2 gateways, and charge almost finishing up now for UEDCommander. We may end up seeing a nice little bit of a timing attack here as the charge finishes, or perhaps he'll wait for the extra any upgrades to finish here. First Colossus actually on the way now for tGMixMaster, and chronoing out that extended thermal lance. That's actually, I feel that's actually going to be fairly strong here, especially in the current composition that UEDCommander is currently going. tGMixMaster actually having a slight lead on supply as well, slightly increased Stalker count over his opponent. But we are potentially going to see some interesting Colossus-based play here. But UEDCommander is actually throwing down a fairly large number of Stargates here, so we're going to perhaps see some Phoenixes or even the Void Rays coming out here for UEDCommander. I think Phoenixes at this point in time is probably going to be the better choice for dealing with those Colossi. But even Void Rays would be fairly strong, especially against the Stalkers that are there. And in fact, already we are seeing 2 Void Rays on the way. Potentially a third going to be added on as soon as he hits the correct number of minerals for it. And possibly getting those double upgrades as well. It looks like he's setting up for double upgrades. Though tGMixMaster is already more than ahead in upgrades at this point in time. Though we are seeing these Void Rays being chronoed out. It's actually, I feel that's actually a fairly strong choice here, as those Void Rays with their prismatic alignment ability would be able to quite easily tear a Colossus or two to shreds. But the sheer number of Stalkers here is going to make that quite difficult, especially if tGMixMaster is on the ball here with his micro and is going to be able to deal with that in a good fashion and timing. Both players also using this as an opportunity to expand to third bases here, fairly similar timings. So they're both trying to stay on top of their economy. UEDCommander, I feel, still having the slightly better economy here than tGMixMaster, what with having that expansion down slightly earlier than his opponent and getting those few extra probes out has been will have been made all the world of difference. But he's currently actually banking quite a lot of minerals. He needs to spend some of that, maybe throw down some extra production would be a good idea. tGMixMaster actually setting up a nice little bit of a sort of temporary wall in here for his third base, and also adding on a couple of extra gateways here. Looking like he wants to go mostly gateway units in this matchup. I feel that a good decent Stalker count is actually going to be very strong against anything his opponent pulls out of the Stargates here, unless UEDCommander is able to hit a nice critical mass here of Void Rays. Though it looks like UEDCommander has actually managed to supply block himself for a moment there, and that's going to play absolute havoc with his warp-in timings here, as he's going to be delayed for maybe a full round of warp-in. But he has got those double upgrades on the way already. However, we're already seeing Ground Weapons 2 here coming out for tGMixMaster, also adding on that charge. No Stalker Blink yet from either player, and that's actually slightly disappointing. Some Blink play could be very strong. Blinking Stalkers directly onto the Colossi would be absolutely fantastic to see. And even being able to blink them directly under the Void Rays. Though, of course, tGMixMaster isn't actually aware, I don't think, at this point in time, that his opponent is actually going Stargate. No, he still has no scout out on the field in that part of the map. And in fact, he doesn't actually have an observer at all, I don't think. No, he does have one observer, but it looks like it is actually currently with his army, ready to see any cloaked play that is UEDCommander is deciding to go. Both players actually turtling a little bit, but waiting to build up their death balls here. Protoss actually very strong when they've got those units in a nice ball. Certainly, as primarily a Terran player myself, I know that Protoss is all about that nice death ball here. And actually, interesting choice here. UEDCommander has actually thrown down a fleet beacon, so we could be looking to see maybe some mothership core being turned into mothership here, or perhaps even carrier play. So we could actually be looking to see some pretty big Protoss air units here for the late game, because it does look like UEDCommander is actually wanting to put a big focus on the air. I mean, he's got the gateways as a backup here for gateway units. Templar Archives, though, finishing up now for tGMixMaster, so if it is the mothership core, the feedbacks on that could be absolutely devastating here for UEDCommander. I mean, if he loses a mothership to some well-placed feedbacks, that could cause so many problems for him, especially no longer having the cloak for all of his units. But it will be, I am actually curious to see what he intends to do now with that fleet beacon. Will it be the carriers? Will it even be Tempests? Tempest play could be very strong, especially against these immortals here. That would be rather entertaining to see, especially as this is actually a phenomenal amount of Colossus. So Tempest against those Colossus without any ability to shoot up is going to be pretty devastating. But I don't agree, I think, with tGMixMaster's choice of having simply so many Colossi here. I mean, they've got a lot of ground DPS, but he's got almost no upward firing DPS, only this small number of Stalkers here. And against the sheer mass of UEDCommander's Void Rays here, that's actually, I feel, a very poor choice here from tGMixMaster, not knowing that his opponent's going Void Ray, and simply adding on far too many Colossi. Those will be absolutely shredded by those Void Rays. And in fact, here come the Void Rays now. UEDCommander will want to be actually focusing down those Colossi, trying to preserve as many of his ground units as possible. But in fact, those Void Rays actually doing more than their money's worth here, picking up the majority of those Stalkers. Actually, a sensible choice here, focusing down those Stalkers first, taking out the only units that can shoot up. And now he should be able to pick up all of these Colossi with absolutely no problems at all, despite the fact that these are on +1 armor and +2 ground weapons. They are being absolutely melted by those Void Rays, and even these immortals are going to be dropped in seconds to this colossal Void Ray play here. Though those immortals are going to get a little bit of damage on the mineral line there, and have been able to maybe pick up a few probes, almost actually clearing out this third base here for UEDCommander. But that number of Void Rays is simply now at critical mass. I don't think that tGMixMaster is going to be able to respond to this. I mean, even if he gets out a large number of Stalkers in short time, these Archons aren't going to be able to do nearly enough damage, especially with prismatic alignment. And in fact, UEDCommander actually going to float these straight over into the main, going primarily straight for the those production facilities straight up. In fact, if he can take out that Cyber Core, that'll be no Stalkers at all to respond to this. If he can get the Templar Archives as well, no additional Archons. tGMixMaster are actually going to have to try and respond to this by pulling in those Archons. But with the Prismatic Alignment ability being turned on there, he might want to wait for that to time out. If he doesn't, he could be very dangerous here, as they will absolutely tear through those shields very quickly. But oh no, that's actually gutting. UEDCommander actually bunching all of his Void Rays into one small area, and those Archons do absolutely incredible amounts of splash damage and simply tore all of those Void Rays apart in literally a fraction of a second. So it's now actually going to be putting UEDCommander a little bit on the back foot here. tGMixMaster actually got a decent sized army here, a lot of Zealots and a fair chunk of Archons, and he's going to be able to pretty much go straight for UEDCommander's bases unopposed here. UEDCommander having this Mothership Core on full energy and only a handful of Void Rays now, but almost no minerals to be able to warp in Zealots or any Stalkers that he would need to be able to try and deal with this. So definitely on the back foot now. tGMixMaster has been able to turn that around simply by some poor positioning and placement from UEDCommander. Losing all of those Void Rays in one go was definitely a bad move here for UEDCommander. Mustn't have been paying attention to that fight in the slightest. That sheer number of Archons being able to just, as I say, peel them apart in seconds. And this looks like it could be a well-deserved GG straight away here, as those Archons are going to do so much damage inside the base. But he has actually, UEDCommander has actually got some Tempest out now, and it's built up again a nice little mass of Void Rays here. He may actually be able to hold this. He's certainly going to lose some production here. He's certainly going to lose maybe a decent number of probes. In fact, checking the probe loss count here, we are actually seeing 53 workers killed here for UEDCommander. He's lost so many workers for this, so his economy is going to be suffering a bit now. But those Tempests are going to be actually able to melt those Archons. They're going to burn through their shields and no problem. tGMixMaster now mixing in some additional Stalkers though to try and get the drop on his opponent, but not having Blink yet is going to cost him. He can't blink in underneath them. And those Tempests should be able to just hover backwards out of the way and simply pick off those Archons one by one. In fact, even pick off those Stalkers one by one. Though UEDCommander needs to be very careful now not to lose them. But it looks like tGMixMaster is just going to try and push in for the victory, ignoring the forces here. No, he is actually turning around, going in on those Void Rays. He is going to be able to pick off at least a decent number of them, but he's going to lose, I think, the majority of his Stalkers for this. That was pretty poor choice here. I mean, he has taken out the Nexus at the natural, but losing all those Stalkers gives him now no anti-air capability. He's relying entirely on these Zealots here. He needs to get all of these up now into the main. UEDCommander inflicting terrible losses here, but I think, in all fairness, I'm going to have to say the tGMixMaster has got this now. UEDCommander's economy is almost completely in ruins. tGMixMaster now on 3 bases, having such a huge bank here, could quite literally afford to warp in so many zealots, easily resupply almost entirely on zealots in half a second flat. And once that Nexus goes, I think this is pretty much game over for UEDCommander. In fact, there we go, the probe's going down there. In fact, I actually think that UEDCommander no longer has... No, he does actually still have 1 probe. No, wait, that's just gone as well. UEDCommander basically out of this game now. Only a matter of time for tGMixMaster to clear up whatever's left here, depending on how much obviously damage those Tempests will do in the interim time. But with no probes to rebuild, this is indeed game over here, and UEDCommander just going to be dragging that out. There goes the GG there, and that is game. All in all, I'd have to say well played by tGMixMaster. You pulled an absolutely fantastic comeback. Those Archons being able to tear apart those Void Rays was certainly good luck, I think, on tGMixMaster's behalf. UEDCommander not paying too much attention there and allowing all those Void Rays to clump up was a pretty huge mistake. But all in all, a very cool game. Good to see some of those new Protoss units, especially the Tempest, being used to effect, and watching them melt away those Archons was absolutely beautiful. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed this game, and stay tuned for further casts coming up, and subscribe to this channel on YouTube if you're enjoying these casts so far. But for now, hasta lasagna. Don't